Hey everyone, I'm Emma Ball. Welcome to this week's installment of our using AI ML to trade FX series. We've been through a few episodes, I think 4 episodes already. We created kind of a hello world. We built on that a little bit, bringing it closer to the ballpark of where we need to be with class weights and looking at how we measure success. Then we looked at logistic regression, and it was important to peer under the cover and see a lot of the limitations of basic logistic regression, because we're going to have to develop that, and particularly how it worked with normalization. So this article, we're going to beef up our features. So we're going to say, and what we were inferring last time was our hypothesis wasn't really correct, that at least using the price, that the last 4 periods don't really predict, at least not very well, if the price is going to move quickly in the next 4 periods. So this article, we are going to build on that a little bit and add some more features and see what happens. Hey everyone, I'm Emma Ball. Welcome to this week's installment of our using AI ML to trade FX series. We've been through a few episodes, I think 4 episodes already. We created kind of a hello world. We built on that a little bit, bringing it closer to the ballpark of where we need to be with class weights and looking at how we measure success. Then we looked at logistic regression, and it was important to peer under the cover and see a lot of the limitations of basic logistic regression, because we're going to have to develop that. And particularly how it worked with normalization. So this article, we're going to beef up our features. So we're going to say, and what we were inferring last time was our hypothesis wasn't really correct, that at least using the price, that the last 4 periods don't really predict, at least not very well, if the price is going to move quickly in the next 4 periods. So this article, we are going to build on that a little bit and add some more features and see what happens. So let's see some of the limitations we had last time around. So if you look at this chart, this is the one we've been using the last 7 years, AUD, USD. This is a candlestick type chart in that it captures 4 key pieces of information, and that is within each 1 hour period, and we're using the 1 hour chart, the low, which is the bottom, the high, which is obviously the top, and the open and the close, which is the thicker bar, and where that fits in. So there's actually 4 pieces of information, and that is the open, the close, the high, and the low. In our original hypothesis, we used only the close price at each hour. So there's 1 piece of information when we have 4. So our hypothesis was something in that last 4 close prices predicts a sudden movement within 4 hours after that. And that may or may not be true. In fact, it's pretty untrue if we're honest about it. But maybe there's more information contained in the movement, the high, the low, that we can start to leverage. And our test file, if you're going to show notes at our test file, we had AUD, USD, as well as EUR, USD. So there's actually 8 pieces of information there that we could potentially be using. So one thing to note is that open and close, while not exactly the same for a lot of reasons we'll go into in another article, often are exactly the same. So the open this period is the same as the close the period before, or normally very close to. So those pieces of information are the same and redundant, and this is an important concept. By adding in pieces of information that are highly correlated, or roughly telling us the same thing, it makes our machine learning more complicated and more difficult. Technically, it makes it harder to converge, but it gives us the wrong types of answers. So always start, and we're going to go through the mathematical techniques of identifying that in a future episode, but at this point, intuitively, just think about how you're separating your information and where that's going. So we have another 6 pieces of information that we could potentially bring into this. So if we keep going back the last 4 periods, now we've got the high, the close, and the low, and the volume. The volume's included in our training files for 2 currency pairs. So we're able to get 8 pieces of information at 4 periods. The last period, the one before that, the one before that, the one before that. And so that gives us a total, and 4 times 8, 24 pieces of information. So let's start coding up for that and see if we can get something more accurate. Okay, so let's check out the code, and again, each episode we've built on the one before, so you can look in the show notes and see the GitHub where you can get the raw code. And last episode we kind of put it more in function calls, procedural calls, and it's no different here. So you can see it here, we just got a function to read in from the GitHub. No change there, the data's the same, we've just kind of separated it. And then where we create our features or our X values. Now, if you remember, we need, from the last one when we looked at normalization, we need a starting point for that movement in time. And so that's why we've always included the open price for both the pairs that we have, the AUD and USD. You can see where we've added them there. And we need to have that number both for the movement from our current period forward, the prediction, as well as where we start coming forward from where we were. Now we could go back and look at it like that, but when you look at the chart, it's going to be more intuitive if you start at the beginning. So that's why we've got 2 start prices there. We've renamed everything, so you can see the format we're using now because we have the feature name and the time period. And yes, if you know where we're going with time periods, we are going to get into time series learning. And then we just run through it and we create our 4 Y periods, as well as keeping track of the points that actually change. And that's going to be important next episode when we look at how we're measuring, because we're not actually measuring it quite right. And another good habit, or something I do, it's probably bad programming practice, but I find it really helps, is every now and then just copy your data frames. They tend to get quite fragmented, and when you start doing a lot of processing on them, they start to pull apart and you'll get lots of warnings and it slows down. So every now and then just make a copy of it and it kind of resets all its internal indexing. The normalization function really hasn't changed from last week. I mentioned the 2 different opens, so we have to be able to adjust for that. And then of course the volume. What we've done with normalization with the volume is just manually set it in when we use points and percentage to try and get it roughly in the same range as the other values. And particularly with logistic regression, as we looked at last week, if the range is way out, you're going to get funny results. So it's got to be close. But where we use normalization between 0 and 1 or standard deviation, it's all going to be put roughly into the same range anyway. No change to our training and validation data sets, no change to calculating class weights, and then no change to our metrics. And this is really important because as we change things, we need the same set of metrics so we have a basis of comparison. And now we're making more and more changes. And what we're going to do in the future episode is have a lot more features or potential features, and then we're going to be adding them in and out and looking at what changes and see if it becomes more or less accurate. So it's very important to have that down pat. And next episode we're going to be doing the whole program on exactly this, because we're not actually doing this quite right. And then of course we just run our code. For the different normalization methods, we've got all of our feature names. We create our X values for each normalization method. We normalize that data. We get our training and validation sets, our class weight, and then we train it using the standard logistic regression set. And we're not doing anything fancy with the methods that we're using and so forth here. We will be going into deep learning. We will be going into time series based learning. We're even going to graph it and look at it using visualization and visual learning. The net result is actually you can get a little bit better using different techniques, but it's not by as much as you probably think. And it's going to spit out all the different results. I'm not going to take you through this because I've got a little graph that we're going to jump to. All right, so let's see what we've got here. Our original results with the single pricing feature gives the log loss we talked about, true positives, false positives, and most importantly, the precision and recall, which combined is the F1, which was pretty uninspiring if we're honest. And then what we've changed here with the extra features, and what you're going to see is there's really no change. There's probably an argument for it. It's even gotten worse, which when you go through your different hypotheses, that's not unusual. One thing to note there is you are going to get some errors go off about non-convergence. And because when you add lots of features, you've got so many things going on, it takes longer for the algorithms to work out what's happening. So by default, the logistic regression algorithm is limited to 100 iterations. If you turn that up to 1,000, just change the maximal factor, and when you create the regression variable, you're going to suddenly find that those errors go away. But it's interesting to point out because while we were training that, while we're getting these errors, we did start to get some spurious results that were actually better than what we were seeing. So it's what these things are adding up to is something's not right, something's not converging, something doesn't make sense. And in this case, it's probably a lack of correlation between our hypothesis, something in the last four predicts the next four. So we need to start to pull this apart because adding lots of features as we have really hasn't made any difference. And with the results we have are honestly they're pretty much the same as guessing. And given that we have to pay margins to our broker and we accept a lot of risk in FX because it goes up and down, that's just not going to work. So we need to make some changes. So we're going to start to build upon this feature idea and look at more features. But before we do that, we're going to have to explore how we measure our success, because the way we're doing it now isn't quite right. And we'll explain that in the next episode. But look in the show notes and you'll get the update on where this is all written down, the GitHub where the code is, etc. And feel free to play around. And look for next week when we update our metrics and measurement algorithm.